The opening riff of The Pretender hit me like a physical blow. A tidal wave of sound, guitars screaming, drums pounding a frantic heartbeat into the humid Brazilian air, washed over the stadium, and the crowd of 50,000 people erupted into a single deafening roar. My husband Leo's arm was wrapped tight around my waist, his face alight with pure, unadulterated ecstasy as he screamed the lyrics along with Dave Grohl. This was it. The moment we'd been waiting for, the peak of our dream vacation. I threw my head back and screamed along, trying to force the same joy, trying to lose myself in the glorious, chaotic noise. But my heart was pounding to a different rhythm. It wasn't just the music vibrating through my bones. It was a frantic, terrified drum solo all its own. Because clutched in the pocket of my denim shorts, a small rectangular box was burning a hole through the fabric. An hour earlier, I had been standing in the stark, fluorescent-lit bathroom of the Estadio Municipal Claudio Moser de Azevedo, the concrete walls trembling with the bass of the opening act. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer and chemical cleaner. On the back of the stall door, someone had scrawled Foo Fighters Salva Vidas. Foo Fighters saves lives. I stared at those words, my own life hanging in the balance, and watched as a second pink line, faint but undeniable, bloomed into existence on a cheap plastic stick I'd bought from a nearby farmacia. 2 lines. In the middle of a rock concert, thousands of miles from home, my meticulously planned life had just been completely and irrevocably derailed. Our trip to Brazil was supposed to be a reset button. 2.5 weeks of sun, sea, and family in Maquis, the coastal city where Leo was born and where most of his vibrant, sprawling family still lived. For 6 months, this vacation had been our North Star, the shimmering light at the end of a long, dark tunnel of anxiety and uncertainty. We'd mapped it out with the precision of a military operation. We saved every spare dollar, turning down dinners with friends and canceling streaming subscriptions. I took on extra freelance design projects, working late into the night until my eyes burned. Leo, an engineer for an offshore oil company, had navigated a terrifying corporate restructuring, surviving a round of layoffs that had sent many of his colleagues packing. The fear had lingered for months, a low-grade hum of dread beneath the surface of our lives. This trip wasn't just a vacation. It was a declaration of survival. It was us planting a flag saying, "We made it. We're okay." The first week was everything we dreamed of. We were swept into the warm, chaotic embrace of the Silva family. We spent long, lazy days on Cavaleiros Beach, the sun warming our skin, the salty air healing our frayed nerves. We ate incredible food, mountains of pão de queijo, sizzling platters of picanha at family churrascos, fresh coconut water straight from the source. I loved watching Leo slip back into his native Portuguese, the cadence of his voice softening as he laughed with his cousins and argued playfully with his uncles. He was lighter here, unburdened. For the first time in a long time, so was I. The concert was the crown jewel of the trip. We'd bought the tickets the moment they went on sale. The Foo Fighters were our band. Their music was the soundtrack to our relationship. From our first date where we'd bonded over a shared love for the color and the shape, to the epic road trips where we'd sing Everlong at the top of our lungs, windows down, speeding toward some new adventure. Seeing them live here in Leo's hometown felt cosmically significant, a perfect fusion of our past and present. The first hint of trouble was subtle, a tiny glitch in the matrix of our perfect getaway. My period, usually as punctual as a Swiss train, was 3 days late. At first I dismissed it. Travel does weird things to your body. The long flight, the dramatic shift in time zones and climate, it was nothing. I pushed the thought to the back of my mind, burying it under another plate of my mother-in-law's delicious feijoada. But then 4 days became 5. 5 became a week. The little notification on my tracking app went from a gentle reminder to a glaring red alert. A quiet, cold tendril of panic began to snake its way around my heart. Then the other signs started, ghost-like symptoms I tried to rationalize away. There was the fatigue, a deep cellular exhaustion that felt completely alien to me. One afternoon, during a boisterous family lunch, I found myself nodding off at the table, the lively chatter of Leo's dozen relatives fading into a distant buzz. I woke with a start to find Leo looking at me, his brow creased with a concern I couldn't meet. "Just the jet lag catching up," I'd mumbled, forcing a smile. The food aversions were next. I, a woman who had never met a meal I didn't want to try, suddenly found myself repulsed by the smell of coffee, a scent I usually adored. At a beachside kiosk, the aroma of garlic frying for a batch of lula adore sent me rushing to the restroom, my stomach churning violently. I blamed it on the heat, on something I ate, on anything but the one possibility that was growing from a whisper to a scream in my mind. Leo and I had always talked about kids in the vague, comfortable way you talk about retirement or learning to speak Italian. A beautiful idea for some distant, unspecified someday. For me, someday was a fortress of prerequisites. It meant a sizable down payment on a house, not the shoebox apartment we were currently renting. It meant having at least 6 months of living expenses tucked away in a high-yield savings account. It meant Leo's job being rock solid and my freelance business having a steady, predictable income stream, not the feast or famine cycle I was constantly riding. My obsession with preparedness was rooted deep in my own childhood. My parents had me when they were barely 20. They were deeply in love but utterly broke. I grew up in a home filled with affection but also with the constant, crushing stress of unpaid bills and unexpected expenses. I remember hushed, tense arguments about money filtering through my bedroom door at night. I remember the shame of wearing hand-me-down clothes that were never quite the right size. I swore to myself that I would never bring a child into the world until I could give them a life free from that kind of worry. I would do it the right way. I would be ready. And we were so far from ready. The new-to-us SUV we'd been forced to buy 3 months ago when our old car died had eviscerated our savings. Leo's job, while secure for now, was in an industry known for its brutal boom and bust cycles. We were treading water, making progress, but the shoreline of financial security still felt miles away. The thought of a baby, of diapers, daycare, medical bills, of a whole other human being depending on our precarious financial state, wasn't just daunting, it was terrifying. It felt like an anchor that would drag us under. The unspoken truth of it all began to hang between us, thick and heavy in the humid air. I saw the question in Leo's eyes every time I pushed my food around my plate or excused myself to lie down. He would watch me with a quiet, anxious tenderness that broke my heart. We were partners, we told each other everything, but this felt too big, too scary to say out loud. Voicing the possibility felt like conjuring it into existence, and I just wasn't brave enough. So we danced around it, our conversations becoming minefields of avoided topics, the silence between us growing louder than the crashing waves on the shore. The connection that had always been our bedrock was beginning to show hairline fractures under the strain. The day of the concert arrived, and the knot of anxiety in my stomach had tightened into a cold, hard stone. My period was now 10 days late. There was no more denying it, no more rationalizing. I felt a desperate, clawing need to know, to replace the paralyzing uncertainty with a concrete reality, no matter how terrifying that reality might be. The idea formed in my mind, wild and irrational. I would take a test. Today. Before the show. I couldn't stand the thought of this once-in-a-lifetime experience being tainted by the what if. I needed to know what I was singing along to, a celebration of our life as it was or a requiem for it. Leo, I said, my voice barely a whisper as we were getting ready to leave for the stadium. He was buzzing with excitement, pulling on his favorite vintage Foo Fighters t-shirt. I think we need to stop at a pharmacy on the way. The excitement drained from his face, replaced by that look of quiet understanding I had come to dread. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He just nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine. Okay, he said, his voice soft. Okay, we can do that. And in that one word, in his immediate acceptance, a tiny fissure of light broke through my wall of fear. We were still a we. The drive to the stadium was the quietest 10 minutes of our entire relationship. The streets of Makey, usually a symphony of honking horns, rumbling buses and shouted conversations, were amplified by the pre-concert buzz. Throngs of people in black t-shirts migrated toward the stadium lights, their excitement a palpable energy in the air. Inside our car, however, a vacuum of silence had formed. The radio was off. Neither of us spoke. Leo drove with a tense precision, his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I stared out the passenger window, the vibrant street scenes blurring into a meaningless smear of color. My mind, in stark contrast to the silence, was a deafening cacophony of fear. A rapid-fire slideshow of worst-case scenarios played on a loop. I saw us back home, sitting at our small kitchen table under the harsh glow of the overhead light, our bank statements spread out between us. I saw the numbers that refused to add up, the dream of a house dissolving into the reality of daycare costs and medical copays. I saw the exhaustion on Leo's face, the return of that deep-seated stress we had just started to escape. I saw myself tethered and terrified, my own dreams of growing my business, of traveling, of becoming someone before I became a mother, all turning to dust. The weight of it was suffocating, a physical pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe. Then a traitorous little thought flickered through the panic. What if it was negative? The image that came to mind was of a vast sweeping wave of relief, so powerful it could bring me to my knees. A clean slate. Second chance. We could go back to our plan, get back on track. We would enjoy the concert, finish our vacation, and fly home with nothing but a funny story about a little scare. But as I chased that feeling of relief, something else surfaced right behind it. A surprising, unwelcome pang of loss. I imagined the test stick with its single solitary line. An empty screen. A closed door. And the thought, to my absolute horror, made my heart ache. What was wrong with me? I was terrified of being pregnant, yet terrified of not being pregnant. I felt fractured, split into two different women living in the same skin, both at war with each other. There's one, Leo said, his voice startling me out of my spiraling thoughts. He pointed to a small, brightly lit farmacia on a busy corner a few blocks from the stadium. He pulled the car into a miraculously open parking spot. He cut the engine and the sudden total silence was heavier than ever. I can go in if you want, he offered, turning to me. His face, illuminated by the passing headlights, was a mask of strained calm. I knew he was just as scared as I was. I shook my head, trying to summon a courage I didn't feel. No. I should do it. This felt like my burden to carry, my mess to confront. Leaving the sanctuary of the car felt like stepping off a cliff. The moment I opened the door, the hot, humid air and the distant thump-thump-thump of the opening act's bass line enveloped me. It was real. This was happening. Inside, the pharmacy was an oasis of sterile order amidst the street-level chaos. The air conditioning was a blessed relief. A kindly-looking woman with warm eyes and graying hair stood behind the counter, helping another customer. I busied myself pretending to look at a display of sunscreens, my heart hammering against my ribs. The packaging was all in Portuguese, the brand names unfamiliar. I felt adrift, an outsider in the most profound sense. When it was my turn, I approached the counter, my throat suddenly dry. Do you speak English? I asked, my voice barely a croak. She gave me a gentle, apologetic smile and shook her head. Pouco, she said. A little. My mind went blank. I had practiced the phrase in the car, but now the words evaporated. I took a shaky breath. Preciso de, I faltered, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I finally gave up, miming the shape of a box with my hands and then pointing to my stomach with a questioning look. It was a pathetic, desperate game of charades. Her expression immediately softened with recognition. The gentle, apologetic smile transformed into one of knowing empathy. It was a look I imagined she had seen 1,000 times. It was kind, but it also felt like a confirmation of my fate. She nodded, turned around, and retrieved a small, unassuming blue and white box from a shelf behind her. She placed it on the counter between us without a word. My eyes locked on it. It looked so innocuous. How could something so small hold the power to completely shatter and remake a life? I paid in cash, fumbling with the unfamiliar Brazilian reis. The pharmacist placed the box in a small plastic bag and handed it to me. Our fingers brushed. Boa sorte, she whispered. Good luck. The kindness in her voice almost broke me. I wanted to burst into tears right there in the middle of the brightly lit aisle. Instead, I managed a weak smile, mumbled, obrigada, and fled. Back in the car, I placed the bag on my lap. Leo looked at it, then at me. Okay, he said, his voice steady. We've got it. We don't have to do anything until we get home, you know. We can just put it away and try to enjoy tonight. I knew he was offering me an escape route, a chance to postpone the verdict. And every cowardly bone in my body wanted to take it. But I also knew it was a lie. There would be no enjoyment, no escape. The little box would be a ticking time bomb in my suitcase. The question would be a ghost haunting every moment of the rest of our trip. No, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I have to know. Let's just go. The walk from the car and through the stadium gates was a surreal blur. We were swept up in a river of laughing, shouting, singing bodies, but we were completely alone, adrift in our own private bubble of dread. We found our spot on the crowded floor, reasonably close to the stage. The opening band was loud, energetic, and I couldn't tell you a single thing about them. My entire consciousness had shrunk to the size of the box in my pocket. We stood side by side, a foot of space between us that felt like a mile-wide chasm, and watched the show. A guy next to us, his face flushed with excitement and cheap beer, tried to start a conversation with Leo, who just nodded and smiled politely, his eyes constantly flicking back to me. After 3 songs that felt like an eternity, I couldn't take it anymore. The suspense was a physical acid eating away at my insides. I leaned over to Leo, my lips close to his ear to be heard over the music. "I'm going to do it now," I said. He looked down at me, his eyes wide in the flashing strobe lights. "Right now. Here. I can't wait, Leo. I'm going crazy." He stared at me for a second, his own fear warring with his need to support me. Then he nodded, his expression firming with resolve. He took my hand, his grip solid and warm. "Okay," he said, his voice clear and strong despite the roar around us. "You go. I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever it says, we'll face it together." His words were the lifeline I desperately needed. Together. I squeezed his hand, gave him a shaky, grateful look, and turned to push my way through the dense, pulsing crowd. The journey to the bathroom felt like wading through molasses. Every happy, oblivious face I passed was a reminder of the carefree world I felt I was leaving behind forever. I finally saw the sign, a generic female silhouette, and joined the line of women waiting to get in. They were laughing, reapplying lipstick, complaining about the price of beer. I stood among them, silent and invisible, clutching the little box in my pocket like a talisman, and waited for my turn to face the music. The click of the stall door shutting behind me was the loudest sound in the world. It locked me into a tiny, graffiti-scarred universe, sealing off the roaring stadium and the 50,000 people outside. For a moment, the only sound was the frantic pounding of my own blood in my ears. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely tear open the flimsy cardboard box. The plastic stick felt slick and foreign in my sweaty palm. The instructions, a folded-up piece of paper covered in dense Portuguese, were useless to me. I could only rely on the universal, terrifying pictograms. I did what I had to do, my movements clumsy and robotic. Then came the worst part, the waiting. I placed the test face down on the small metal toilet paper dispenser, as if not looking at it could somehow influence the outcome. 2 minutes. An entire lifetime. I leaned my head against the cool metal of the stall door, the vibrations of the bass line a dull, steady pulse against my skull. I read the words scrawled in black marker right in front of my face again. Foo Fighters salva vidas. Foo Fighters saves lives. I let out a sound that was half a laugh, half a sob. I wasn't sure if my life was being saved or completely obliterated. My mind raced. I tried to make bargains with a universe I wasn't sure I believed in. "Please, not now. Just give us 1 more year. I promise I'll be ready then. We'll be ready." I pictured Leo's face, his hopeful, excited expression on the drive over, now replaced in my mind's eye with a look of crushing disappointment and fear. I couldn't do that to him. I couldn't do that to us. After what felt like an hour, I took a deep, shuddering breath. It was time. My hand shook as I reached out and slowly, deliberately turned the test over. 1 line. A crisp, dark, immediate control line. For a single beautiful microsecond, pure, unadulterated relief washed over me. It was negative. It was a false alarm. The wave of relief was so potent it made me dizzy. We were safe. The plan was safe. And then I saw it. A ghostly, impossibly faint shadow materializing beside the first line. I snatched the stick, holding it up to the dim light, my eyes straining. Was I imagining it? Was it a smudge? But it wasn't. It was real. As I watched, breathless, the shadow slowly darkened, blooming from a hint of a line into a pale but distinct, unwavering, world-ending, world-creating second pink line. Positive. The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. The roar of the stadium, the pounding music, the entire world outside my little metal box completely ceased to exist. There was only the thumping in my chest and the 2 pink lines on the plastic stick in my trembling hand. The terror I had been anticipating was there, cold and sharp, but it was accompanied by something else, something I couldn't have predicted. It was awe. A profound, terrifying, earth-shattering sense of wonder. A life. A life was growing inside of me here now. It was no longer a theoretical problem to be solved someday. It was a reality as real as the plastic in my hand and the ground beneath my feet. I don't know how long I stood there just staring. Eventually, the sound of the outside world filtered back in. The flush of a toilet, the chatter of women waiting in line. I knew I had to move. I had to face Leo. I unlocked the door and walked out into the relative brightness of the bathroom, my legs feeling like they didn't belong to me. I didn't look at anyone. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, the test clutched in my fist, my mission singular: find Leo. He was exactly where he said he would be, a fixed point in the swirling chaos of the crowd. His eyes were scanning the area, and they locked onto mine the second I emerged from the throng. The question was written all over his face, a raw mix of hope and dread. I didn't have the strength to form words. I just walked up to him, my eyes filling with tears, and opened my hand, revealing the test. He stared down at it. For a long second he didn't move, didn't breathe. I saw the shock register, the momentary widening of his eyes as he processed the 2 lines. I braced myself for the fear, for the panic, for the quiet, "What are we going to do?" that I was certain would follow. But that's not what happened. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, he slowly lifted his gaze from the test to my face. The fear in his eyes was melting away, replaced by something I can only describe as wonder. A slow, brilliant smile spread across his face, a dawn breaking after a long night. He let out a shaky, breathless laugh. And then, right there in the middle of 50,000 screaming rock fans, he wrapped his arms around me and lifted me off the ground, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. "Oh my God," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. He set me down but kept his arms around me, his forehead pressed against mine. "We're having a baby." He said it not as a question, not as a problem, but as a statement of incredible, miraculous fact. The tears that had been threatening finally spilled over, streaming down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of fear anymore. He wiped them away with his thumb, his own eyes shining. "Are you scared?" I managed to whisper. "Terrified," he admitted with another laugh. "But we're going to be okay. I've got you. We've got this." And just like that, the crushing weight I had been carrying for weeks lifted. The financial worries, the fears about my career, the terror of not being ready, they didn't vanish, but they were suddenly manageable. They were just details, logistical problems to be solved. They were no match for the strength I felt in his arms, for the unwavering certainty in his voice. He was my partner. We were a team. We were together. That was the only thing that mattered. As if on cue, the stadium lights went dark. A roar unlike anything I had ever heard erupted from the crowd, a physical shockwave of sound. A single spotlight hit the stage and there they were. The Foo Fighters. The opening chords of Times Like These ripped through the stadium, and the entire crowd began to sing along. "It's times like these you learn to live again." Leo pulled me against his chest and we swayed to the music. That concert was no longer just a concert. It was a landmark. It was our baby's first rock show. Every song felt like it was written for us. When they played My Hero, I looked up at Leo, his face illuminated by the stage lights, and I saw him not just as my husband, but as the father of my child, my anchor in the storm. During the acoustic opening of Everlong, a song about holding on to a perfect moment, I knew this was it. This chaotic, terrifying, beautiful moment was the one I would hold on to forever. We sang and we cried and we held each other, 2 people whose lives had been turned upside down in a stadium bathroom, finding our footing again in the music that had always been our anthem. We walked out of that stadium hours later, hand in hand, into the warm Brazilian night. We were different people than the ones who had walked in. The fear had been replaced by a fierce, protective determination. We weren't the couple with the perfect 5-year plan anymore. We were something better. We were parents-to-be. We were a family. Life rarely happens according to a blueprint. The most beautiful, transformative moments are almost never the ones you plan for. They arrive unannounced, disguised as your greatest fears. There is no such thing as the perfect time to start a family. The perfect time is the moment you decide to face the unknown not with fear but with love. Our little Foo Fighter baby wasn't in our plans, but she ended up being the best plan we ever had. She is the greatest song we will ever write. If you've ever had a life-changing moment happen in the most unexpected place, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Your journey could inspire someone else who is facing their own beautiful, terrifying beginning. Please don't forget to give this a like if our story resonated with you, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about navigating the wonderful chaos of life.